What's the latest price of adequate schools? The latest assessment draws near. No winners in Arkansas, but higher ed won't complain. A complaint against a state official, now an official inquiry. And the behemoth of Bentonville, another step from big box to dance with digital. Arkansas Week, next.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
This is Arkansas Week.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us for Arkansas Week and a busy agenda we have for the next half hour. We're joined today by Rob Moritz, a professor of journalism at UCA and an independent journalist, Steve Bronner, also an independent journalist, and Lance Turner, reporter and columnist, editor for Arkansas Business, and thanks to everybody for coming in. We'll start with business, Lance, because a significant announcement this Friday from the nation's largest retailer, another shift away from big box.
That's what appears to be sort of in the workings. At least they're trying to scale back a tad on some of their brick and mortar stores. And of course, we're talking about Walmart stores of Bentonville, world's largest retailer, but one who in the last year has sort of been struggling by challenges from all sides of its business. But the headline this morning, Walmart closing 269 stores around the world, 154 of those here in the United States. Most of those are smaller format stores. Some of them, about 100 of them, are these newer, small format, sort of quasi-convenience stores called Walmart Express. A lot of those just obviously aren't working out or working to the retailer's satisfaction. Another part of that is stores that are struggling in Brazil. Walmart, of course, is a global player. It's facing some challenges overseas as well, not only in Brazil, but also in the UK, which we can talk about some more as well. A massive shutdown of stores that still really, if you take a look back and keep some perspective, are just about only a fraction of total revenue for this company, about 1%, probably even less than 1% actually. But it is unusual to see Walmart take a step like this. I can't recall, and maybe as we learn more about this and refresh ourselves in the archives, I can't recall a time when Walmart has come out and shuttered stores in a big chunk like this before.
Lance, is this just a shrewd consolidation or another shift toward digital cyber commerce?
Well, it's a little bit of both. So 95% of the stores they're closing in the United States before the end of the month are within 10 miles of another Walmart store. So we've all driven around the state and seen a Walmart on this corner and a Walmart on that corner. They're kind of the Starbucks of the retail world in some places. They seem to be everywhere. And so there's a feeling, obviously among executives and then also among analysts who have followed Walmart, that they have overbuilt and really relied on this supercenter strategy. I mean, we've gone through periods where they're adding, 60 to 100 supercenters on an annual pace, year over year. So I think they've recognized that obviously brick and mortar is not the only place where they need to focus their efforts. And so you've got a challenge, obviously, from the online world, Amazon, which operates on ridiculously thin margins on a quarterly basis. They don't have the overhead that Walmart has, and they are accounting for an increasingly large amount of retail sales in this country. Holiday sale, I mean, just go to your local UPS store and look in the back and see all the Amazon packages that are piled up back there, particularly around the holidays. It's kind of breathtaking. So that's taking a chunk out of not only Walmart's retail sales, but others. But Walmart is particularly in the sights there. Walmart's also facing some issues with grocery competitors like Kroger. There's been a lot of criticism about, does Walmart always have the fresh foods and meats that they need to have? There's been inventory concerns about Walmart. You go to Walmart and it always seems as if they're out of something or another. And executives have acknowledged this in the past year, that they're trying to work on inventory and on fresh foods and grocery.
Inventory control, inventory management was one of the things that made Walmart, right? What kind of happened?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there'll be a lot of people who sort of speculate as to what's gone on there. You know, at one time, they were trying to get even more, I think, just in time with their inventory. So, you know, trying to be, you know, not always have a lot of stuff on the shelves, but have just enough that everybody needs at that moment.
No wasted space.
No wasted space.
Front or
and
back.
There's a relentless drive for efficiency within that company. And so that could have been, you know, a problem as well. They've also struggled with maintaining the everyday low price leadership status too, and executives have pointed that out as well and said we've got to get back to that. In fact, in the UK, their European, well, their Asda, which is the supermarket chain they own in the UK, is spending an extra £500 million to cut prices even further because they're in a three-way battle with supermarket giants in the UK. They're number 2 in the UK. So they're not always the low-price leader is the bottom line, and they've recognized that as well. But the big, you know, I think the big pressure is, you know, online sales, of course. And that is what has led them to invest in their stores. Remember, they're you know, spending $1.5 billion or some such to give employee raises and to increase training at stores, make the stores a better experience. And that is weighing on the bottom line as well. They've cut their forecast for what they're going to make in the next fiscal year. And that's caused problems on Wall Street with shareholders who want those, you know, they want those bigger margins, and they're not always stoked to see that kind of investment happening. But Doug McMillon really believes that they've got to improve the store experience and also find a way to be more aggressive online, and then somehow meld the online experience with the brick and mortar experience. And so that's where Site to Store comes from. That's where a whole host of other programs come from.
And we'll continue to watch. If the public schools in the state wants to, well, if the state wants to stay out of court, Steve, it has to adequately fund its public schools under the Lakeview Agreement, and we have another assessment of what it's going to take coming up.
It's beginning, and it happens every year. The House and Senate Education Committees are beginning to meet. They start in earnest next month preparing the adequacy report, which will basically determine how Arkansas spends 42% of its taxpayer dollars. That's about what goes to our public schools. It'll be a long process. They started hearing from different groups this past week. Ultimately, they will present a report in November. It will pretty much, if history is a guide, it will pretty much be what the legislature votes on. So even though our legislature is part-time and only meets once every 2 years in full session, much of the work will occur in the next 9 months or so in that committee.
Yeah, assuming that, I think it's a fair assumption that whatever the figure that is arrived upon, but it'll get that. It makes budgeting a little bit tighter for the other general revenue agencies.
Well, schools always come first.
Yep.
Under both, you know, the interpretation of the Constitution and the Lakeview case and under state law. K through 12 gets funded first, and then everything else takes what's left. Now, we have an almost entirely different court than decided the Lakeview case. In fact, it may be completely different. And so, you know, all it would take would be another court case, and we might have a different interpretation. Other states have cut K through 12 education spending, but Arkansas notably has not. It's always increased it. The money has pretty much been there, and at least through this next session probably will be again.
Yeah, in those other states, it's usually been a messy proposition. There's usually litigation that follows attempt, though some have done it.
Well, we've had our own share of litigation, and it's been messy, but it's been a while. There's pretty much been a consensus among policymakers everywhere in Arkansas that you don't mess with schools, and that's lasted for a long time. It's beginning to thin a little bit. There are more questions being asked, especially with schools having a whole lot of money in reserve. They are putting money back, a lot of them. But at this point, still, schools are not to be touched. But again, at this point.
Well, had I one of the tickets, I didn't buy one, but I would have been happy to invite you gentlemen to spend a weekend with me on my Pacific Island.
Awesome.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I didn't buy a ticket. But anyway, higher ed probably won't complain. A few more scholarship dollars because of this incredible Powerball stuff.
Right. The state lottery commission reported $12 million additional money generated by the Powerball sales. And Of course, there were 3 Powerball winners, 1 in Tennessee, in Florida, and in California. There were some big winners here, though. I think there were 4 or 5 who won $100,000 and 1 that won $50,000. You know, I think that, and I don't understand what they did to change how the numbers for Powerball, but they made it more difficult to win. And I think that as long as that's out there and people see that pot growing, I think that this will really help the Arkansas Lottery, because I think people are really going to be more interested now in seeing how big this pot of money can go.
It was about 1.6, wasn't it?
Yeah, 1.6.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, if you don't play, you can't win, Steve. So you got to next time get in line for those tickets. But yeah, I think, you know, there's been some other systemic changes to the lottery, you know, since 2014, and I think even now they're looking at some new things to do. There's a business plan that they've formulated that's supposed to be under review. They've hired some consultants to do some things. They've changed their advertising a little bit, and of course there's some new games in the mix as well. And so I think at least this week everyone is terribly optimistic that the lottery is going to kind of break out of its slump. It's sort of the proceeds have dropped, you know, over the years. But in the past 6-month period, we're up, and I think Bishop Woosley is confident that we'll continue to see increases. There's other factors I think at play as well. You know, gas prices are such that you've got a little more of spending money to play with at the gas station where you buy gas. Well, maybe we'll funnel some of that into.
Buy a ticket.
Yeah, exactly. So there's some economic, I think, factors that are a boost as well.
I do think that it's a little bit premature to begin talking about how the lottery money is distributed to students. There are some that are thinking, well, now that we've got all this extra money, we should go back to something other than, you know, $1,000 the first year, to the second, through the third. I think you need to give it a year or two just to see how the momentum goes on this before they go back to tinkering with the amount of money the students get. I'd like to see for them to change it, but I do think it's a little bit premature.
State Ethics Commission. And Steve, and one of our constitutional officers, a complaint, now an inquiry.
Yeah, Matt Campbell with the Blue Hog Report, a very aggressive blog, has been after Dennis Milligan, the state treasurer. He has complained that Milligan has used, back when he was Saline County Circuit Clerk, using staff members and equipment. The Ethics Commission has said that at least there's enough to go by, and so there's going to be an inquiry, and we'll see where it goes from there. That's where we are right now.
And Mr. Milligan also went before the legislature this past week to ask to basically an accounting maneuver. It has to be approved, but to move more money from one of his accounts to the legal account.
That's right. On top of these ethics complaints that again sort of deal with him using you know, some county equipment while he was running for Secretary of State, and then also when he became Secretary of State, hiring some legislators' wives and paying them a little more than what was supposed to be paid. He's also fighting a defamation lawsuit from a former employee, and so yeah, he went before that committee this week to ask if he could use $50,000 toward his defense, and so I think that remains under review. It's another issue in the state treasurer's office. You know, we've just gotten past Martha Schaffner, and of course Milligan, while running for this office, you know, promised a clean slate ethics-wise, that things would be better, that the shadow of that Martha Schaffner scandal would be wiped away, and now we've got these two issues and some other things that we've highlighted at Arkansas Business. How he spent money on a financial literacy program, $400,000 to purchase this program and implement it into schools, when there's really, you know, it's debatable as to whether there's a call for the state treasurer's office to be getting involved in education issues about financial literacy, and so. It's another I don't know. It's another smoky issue around that office that really could use a break from ethical questions.
Plus, that contract that he signed was a no-bid contract as well.
That's right.
I believe.
That's
he
right.
just met this person somewhere, and after discussing it with them, you know, an assistant on the staff went ahead and signed the contract.
Yeah.
We'll continue to follow. We note the passing of not one but two former Chief Justices of the Arkansas Supreme Court within days of one another. Brad Jessen passed away on Monday, and on Thursday, The recently retired Justice Jim Hanna succumbed after a lengthy illness.
Right. Judge Hanna left on August 31st, citing health reasons. We were caught unaware that I wasn't aware that he was that close, and he did pass away this week. Lots of nice things said about him. The Supreme Court has not said as much nice about him as it typically would. He left after a massive dispute among the court that really laid bare some of the divisions over whether or when or how Arkansas should rule on the gay marriage. And since then, the court has not done some of the things it typically does when a justice retires. A pure curiam decision, which basically says it's basically a thank you for your service type thing. That was never done. It still hasn't been done. Some nice things were said about him, but we're still waiting for the court to kind of come out en masse and say nice things about him.
If I could add something, Judge Hanna was the Chief Justice during much of the Lakeview case and the whole court issues regarding adequacy. And it's kind of ironic that he would pass this week when the legislature is now wrestling again with the adequacy issue, and some are maybe they're not advocating, but they're suggesting that maybe there could be some cuts, which would be something that Governor Beebe always fought, and Governor Hutchinson also, I think he opposes that. But then there's the idea that the education funding cannot be cut. And what you've got now is a lot of these lawmakers, because of term limits, who were not there 10 years ago when we had to sit through all those oral arguments and all those committee meetings and hear all the testimony regarding adequacy in Lakeview. And it's almost like a whole new relearning curve that they're having to go through, because some of them just don't recall how difficult it was just to get to where we are now. And so now and you're right, as you said earlier, that it may not be this year or next year, but in the eventual future, there might be more of a push to, curb or not fund education totally before everything else.
And Mr. Justin, of course, had a long and distinguished career in the law and in public service and in politics. Mr. Justin was an early aide to then Governor Bumpers, and was appointed interim chief or appointed Chief Justice by Governor Tucker following the resignation of, I think, Chief Justice Holt, and was always a gentleman and a thoroughly decent individual.
It kind of says something about the court's lack of visibility, in that if we had a former governor and a recent governor, the previous governor, pass away within a week, it would be huge story, huge news. We lost 2 chief justices in a week's time. It's a big story, but they just don't have that kind of visibility. And as time passes and as the court becomes more political, they probably will have more visibility.
Yeah, it's notable that what goes on behind the scenes at the court is commanding so much attention rather than the careers of these 2 men. Last week we spent a good deal of this broadcast recalling the life and times of Dale Bumpers, and simply for want of time, we did not overlook, but simply ran out of time, we were going to mention the fact that former Speaker Hayes McClurkin died within days of Senator Bumpers. And it was Mr. McClurkin who was among that crowded field in the 1970 Democratic primary that Mr. Bumpers had ultimately prevailed. We'll move on. We had another debate. We had a State of the Union message. We got plenty of politics. The two candidates with ties to Arkansas. Mrs. Clinton is having a moment now in Iowa.
Yeah, I think that Senator Sanders is really I may be close to taking the lead, or it's a virtual dead heat now in Iowa. And I think a lot of people underestimated Senator Sanders or overestimated Hillary Clinton. I think that there is a lot of concern about Hillary Clinton's kind of mainstream or Washington connections, whereas they see Senator Sanders as a outspoken outsider, even though he's been in the Senate for a long time. And so that's really going to be interesting to watch over the next few weeks before the Iowa caucus. The other thing is almost the virtual tie now between, or maybe Ted Cruz has taken the lead in Iowa over Donald Trump. And interesting, they had the Republican debate last night, and Donald Trump and Ted Cruz really went at it on a lot of different issues. And Donald Trump was heard afterwards saying that he thought the bromance between the two of them was over, because for the longest time they never really wanted to criticize each other because they're both trying to woo the same basic core group of voters. But now all the gloves are off because Senator Cruz is really surging in the polls amongst Republicans.
On the Democratic side, the former President Clinton was quoted just a couple of days ago as someone asked him, "Are you surprised at this sudden surge by Senator Sanders, at least in the polls in Iowa?" And Mr. Clinton replied, "No, I thought it would happen weeks ago." And I suspect he's telling the truth here. I'm a bit surprised myself. And it may be the Wall Street, the supposed ties between, it's the economic populism theme that Bernie Sanders is trying to strike.
Well, what does it say about our politics when one of the two leading candidates for the Democratic nomination is not a Democrat? He's a self-described socialist. And the leading Republican candidate really hasn't been a Republican very long, Donald Trump. This says a lot about voters' restlessness with the two parties. At the moment, those are still the only choices, are those two parties. But right now, that's, the leaders. I mean, Senator Sanders has a way of connecting with some of those folks in Iowa. But remember, this is an Iowa caucus. It doesn't always produce a winner. It sometimes produces not a fringe candidate, but someone on the outside. There's a long way to go.
And Iowa hasn't been friendly to Hillary Clinton. I mean, you remember, in 2008, she lost to Obama there, and you would expect. I just think conventional wisdom, what you would expect a Ted Cruz to play better in Iowa than you would a Donald Trump. So there's a ways to go, and we're still trying to thin the herd on the Republican side, and I don't know that we have any clear answers there either, except that it's just going to be, as February 1st gets closer, it's going to get a lot more tooth and nail.
You keep hearing about moderate Republicans trying to figure out where they are in the race, but it seems like they're not getting any traction, because the moderate Republicans, and talking Chris Christie and Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush and Governor Kasich of Ohio, they seem to be all about the same, and it's Donald Trump and Ted Cruz who keep getting, the support for them keeps getting more and more, and they're kind of running away with it almost.
Well, and you see some of the moderate faction moving to the right, trying to catch some of that flame. It isn't working very well for our former governor in Iowa, or for that matter, anywhere else.
Right. He actually won the Iowa caucus when he ran for president back in
8 years ago.
Yeah, 8 years ago. He was interviewed recently during a campaign stop. I think it was in South Carolina. They asked him, he's on the quote-unquote undercard of the Republican candidates because he doesn't have the polling numbers to even get to the main stage during debates. And he's talking about the evangelicals and how he's really going to get their support. And there seems to be a almost entitlement, I guess you could say, on him, thinking that he's going to get that once the votes start coming in. But I don't know. I don't know that that's really the issue that people are looking for this time around.
What's at work, Steve?
Well, one thing that's at work is that the guy doesn't give up when people say he should give up. We all remember 2008, McCain had already clinched the nomination, and Huckabee said, "I'm going to stay in until the bitter end." In fact, he went on Saturday Night Live, made a big joke about it. It was very funny. He'll get out when he's ready to get out. But it seems that, I mean, there has been signals from his campaign that if he doesn't do something in Iowa, that he'll get out. And right now, his numbers are very low there. Iowa's a funny state. It's a caucus, not a primary. That means you don't go to the polls. You go to the barn. You go to the local church. You trek out in the middle of a February night, and you go into a room, and it's not private. And you go to they say, everybody for Huckabee, go over to this corner. Everybody for Cruz, go to this corner. It's very public. It's very time-consuming, and only a certain percentage of people actually vote. So you can't look at polls with Iowa and funny things can happen in Iowa. Put it that way.
And if I've got it correct, Iowa predicts, both Democrat and Republican, predicts the eventual winner about half the time in November, about half the time at best.
Yeah.
Right. Carter won it, but not a whole lot of other ones have won it. I mean, Huckabee won it. He didn't win he wasn't. But then Obama won it.
Yep.
So, it's not necessarily a good predictor, but it will winnow out. It will. I mean, if Santorum or Huckabee doesn't do something there, you've got to think that there'll be.
If the Arkansas, we've got about a minute left. If the Arkansas Republican primary were held today, who would win?
Cruz.
Who would come out first?
Cruz.
Lance.
Sounds like Cruz, yeah.
Cruz.
We're out of time. Thanks to everybody for watching. Gents, thanks to you for coming in. See you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.